All right, again, welcome to today's presentation on judges, superintendents, Fairbooks, and ribbons. So with that, I'm going to turn today's webinar over to Beth Henshaw, Southeast Area 4-H Specialist, to get us started.
Good morning, everybody. We are so glad that you've joined us this morning. I'm Beth Henshaw, and on behalf of Diane Mack, Amy Solik, and Sarah Keatley, we do want to welcome you to our first of a series of 4 webinars to help you consider how to revamp, revitalize, and re-energize your county fair. The slide in front of you, you can see the topics for the different webinars. We would be happy for you to join us for one or all 4 or whatever fits in your schedule. And then, as Sarah mentioned earlier, we will be archiving all of these on a website. So if you missed something and would like to go back to it, that will be an option as well. And Amy will show you a little bit more about how to find those later in our presentation today. So why are we doing this webinar series? We know that a lot of effort is put into county fairs, and we do want them to be the very best that they can be. With the resources and information that we'll be sharing, it's our hope that you won't have to reinvent the wheel and that you'll have some new ideas and some things to think about and possibly implement on your local level. We also know from research that happened right here in Kansas that if families are interested in 4-H, they will come to the county fair for information. That means potential 4-H families are at your fair every year. And lastly, the county fair gives attendees a quick look at the health and vibrancy of your local 4-H program. We all want to be mindful of the message that people are taking home about our program when they visit our fair.
So we know that fair boards and extension staff work together to have a successful fair. We wanted to start here by just looking at some rules and policies that the Kansas Department of 4-H Youth Development has within its system. So the first policy that we have is the County Fair Policy on Authority. So I'm just going to kind of read through this so that you can see this. It's if you want to refer back to its J2.3, is that the Extension Board is the policy-making authority for the 4-H Youth Development Division of the fair. So rules and regulations must conform to policies and procedures established by the Director of Extension. So then fair boards may not establish rules and regulations for participation of the members in the 4-H division. Fair boards may, with the approval of the Extension Board, establish a club meeting attendance policy for eligibility to participate in a project, sale, or auction. And if eligibility rules are established and approved by the Extension Board, requirements should be in place and communicated at the beginning of the 4-H year, which is October 1. But fair boards do make those rules and regulations for open class divisions. So Extension Board does the 4-H division of the fair, and fair boards make the rules for open class. The other policy that's within the book is the participation rules. And so basically 4-H members' participation for fairs or the 4-H division is basically based on the following criteria. The exhibit should be the result of knowledge and skills learned within the 4-H project experience throughout the entire year. It's not just about making something or producing something for that fair. So this is where you can find the rules. So, I'll turn it over to Sarah, sorry.
No, absolutely. So we post in mid-February for information for the Kansas State Fair, and that information is posted at kansas4h.org under Events and Activities, under Fairs, and then Kansas State Fair. And again, we're getting ready to post that, and we will let the entire state know once that information is available. We post 2 different copies of the Fairbook. The first copy is the copy that is in all black, and it's the published version, it's ready to go for the general public. The second version is a version that is marked up with red and information crossed out. And so this is to show you the changes that have been made in each department so that you can adjust those to your Fairbook easily. What we encourage you to do is to have your county Fairbook mirror the Kansas State Fairbook so that those youth who are exhibiting at the state fair are following the same rules and regulations at the county fair that they would at the state fair. There's also additional state fair entry information on that website. During your county fair, you can use that information as well. But again, the state Fairbook is a great guideline to use for you to use as you prepare your county Fairbook.
Okay, then the first sort of group of folks that you'll need to start working with or outlining far in advance from your actual fair is superintendents. And we all know how important they are to a successful, smooth county fair experience. And I've kind of put together a timeline of things that need to happen and things to consider. And so as early as February, start making a list of each project area and how many superintendents you might need in one given area. Some projects will only require one superintendent. Some of your larger project areas may require 3, 4, 5, on upwards. You also need to decide if the superintendents can do both 4-H and open class, or do you need to get separate superintendents, one for 4-H and one for open class. It all kind of depends on the timing and your numbers, the location of your different exhibits. So take all those factors into consideration. When thinking about who might serve as a good superintendent, I've had a lot of success reaching out to school teachers that are off for the summer, retired persons. 4-H alumni make great superintendents. They have a background in it. They've experienced it themselves, and they're very good help. So think outside of the box. I think we tend to gravitate towards parents of current members or other project leaders and club leaders, and we know that they have their hands full assisting their clubs and their own children. So think beyond those typical people. In March is when I would recommend sending that first, what I refer to as the first ask letter. And since many of your superintendents are local folks that live within your county borders, I don't typically include a response card and simply ask for them to call you and let you know yes or no. But you'll send out that first ask letter. And then in April, March and April are kind of just a constant cycle of sending letters and following up with phone calls and checking people off your list and moving to the next one. And you just kind of have to stay diligent to stay on top of it. I would suggest that you sit down as an office and kind of decide maybe who can take what project areas, so that way one person doesn't get overwhelmed with that task. Then as a follow-up closer, June or July, depending on when your fair is, usually 3 weeks out, I think is a good rule of thumb, is to send that confirmation letter, just, getting back in touch with them and including a copy of the Fairbook, or at least the section of rules that pertain to their department or division. I think it's helpful to include a list of other superintendents so that they can see who's helping. Maybe there are junior superintendents that they'll have to assist them. I also include a superintendent checklist. I'll touch base on that as a resource later in another slide. And then to include that consultative judging handout. If they're not familiar with the 4-H style of judging or that project exhibit experience, I think it's really helpful that they understand the process and the meaning behind it, and understand that child will sit down and have that conversation with the judge. And then obviously as a follow-up after your fair, sometime in August typically, you'll want to follow up with a thank you note. Responsibilities of superintendents will vary from fair to fair a little bit, especially with their level of experience or their level of comfort, their personality. But these are kind of a good starting list of what some of their responsibilities may be. And it'll help you ask the right people and help them better understand their role. So they may possibly help select judges and other help, such as junior superintendents, clerks, gatekeeper, a ring steward, etc. You might take care of that. If you've got someone that you really trust to tackle that, let them. They may facilitate or assist with project exhibit check-ins, weigh-ins, taggings. Of course, those, livestock-related events, those will happen months before your fair. So you'll need to explain that to them so that they're aware. They help record results, write judges' comments. They'll help display the exhibits for the remainder of your fair. In some cases, they'll attach ribbons. Not all counties do that anymore. And then I always think it's nice to ask them to come back and help with the release of exhibits at the end of your fair. And that just kind of keeps that process a little bit more organized and structured so that it isn't just a free-for-all. I mentioned several resources earlier, and when we get through the slideshow, I'll take you to the website where all of these are listed and posted. But the resources that we've made available in regards to superintendents include that initial ask letter. So there's a sample. You'll obviously want to tweak it and cater it to your specifics. We've provided a sample of that confirmation letter to send prior to the fair. We've got examples of the check-in lists, and there's two of them, one that pertain to more of the inside exhibits, or what I always refer to as general projects, and a list that's more specific to your livestock or animal-related project areas. And then there's some consultative judging handouts that will help them better understand that process.
Most often when we are talking about the judging system in regard to 4-H projects, we are talking about the Danish system. And in Kansas, this is most often used in 4-H static exhibits. In this system, all exhibits receive a ribbon. Exhibits are judged in comparison with an ideal standard, not to each other. And exhibits are placed in 4 ribbon groups: purple, blue, red, or white. And there are probably some fairs that are still only using blue, red, and white. Another system that we see is the modified Danish system, and this is often used in livestock shows. Exhibits are compared to a standard, and they're placed in those 4 color ribbon groups, but they're ranked top to bottom within each ribbon group. So you have a first purple, a second purple, a first blue, a second blue, and so on. And then the final system that we see used, and this is most often with open class exhibits, and that's the American system. And in this system, not all exhibits receive a ribbon. Exhibits are ranked 1, 2, and 3. With a different colored ribbon for each placing. And exhibits within the American system are compared to each other. In 4-H youth development, we encourage the use of consultative or conference judging whenever possible, because it fits so well with the experiential learning model, guiding young people to reflect on what they've learned and to apply that for the future. Consultation or conference judging is an opportunity with the judge and the 4-H member. And you can see we have a link there. When we see the resources later, you'll see a guide that explains this to 4-H families, because that might be something new to families who might not understand how our judging process works. Another important part or best practice is having a scorecard or a standard. And we'll also have a link to all of the different Kansas 4-H project standards that we have available. This helps young people know ahead of time what the standards are and also what is expected with the exhibit. In addition to that judging conversation, written comments should be made on the scorecard. This allows the member to go back and consider this information later or at a later time. And it's especially good if things are forgotten from that consultation discussion. So when we're talking about what are standards, a standard is a description of qualities one should find in a product or a skill or expected behavior. So when we're talking about the fair, a standard is a criteria that a judge uses to evaluate an exhibit. Usually a standard has more than one quality to be considered. Ideally, standards are derived from research primarily from land-grant universities and are the same standards used by adults. The appropriate ribbon should be awarded to the exhibitor based on the evaluation of the exhibit using an accepted standard or scorecard. And standards should not be changed because of problems or situations with which the 4-H'er lives and works. The standards stand. We award ribbons based on how the exhibit meets the standards. So when we think about how ribbons are awarded, purple ribbons go to those exhibits that are outstanding on all standards. A blue ribbon goes to those exhibits that exceed the minimum standard, but they may have a few minor flaws where improvements can be made. A red ribbon goes to those exhibits that meet all standards, but there may be visible signs of needed improvements. And a white ribbon is given to those exhibits that fail to meet the minimum standards. Probably one of the biggest questions that we get each year at the Kansas State Fair is, what is it that the ribbons mean? And there's a good poster in the resource section that you'll see later that you can print and have at your fair, and that will help your fair patrons and your 4-H families understand how the ribbons are awarded. One other ribbon that we often see is a participation ribbon. Participation ribbons are awarded to those exhibits that do not meet requirements. Participation ribbons indicate to the 4-H'er that the exhibit was not necessarily poor in quality, only that it did not meet the project requirements as indicated in the fair book. And in addition, participation ribbons are also awarded to clover buds, which is a non-competitive part of 4-H, or your fair may have other participation-only classes as well. One question that often is asked is, what is the parent's role during the judging process? And it's important to remember that the judging conversation is between the 4-H member and the judge. And so it's fine to find a way for parents to be close enough to hear the judging conversation, but it's not for the parents to take part in. And this is another reason why written comments are so important on the scorecard or standard, because then that is something for the parents to help their child use to improve for the next time. There's also a nice resource that you'll see later that explains where parents should be during the judging process, and that the judging process is between the judge and the 4-H'er. And those might be helpful resources for your local fair. Nearly every fair has some kind of special awards in some of the categories. There's most likely no consistency between projects as to how these are awarded or if they're there or not. But you do want to make sure that the fair book that you have specifies how exhibits or recipients will be selected. Your superintendent also needs to understand this as well, and it's wise to have that in the superintendent's book so there's no room for interpretation. And as donors and people in your community come to you to talk about special fair awards that they're interested in providing, it's really important to have that conversation with them about how should that be listed in the fair book? What are those guidelines? Is it going to go to the top exhibit in a class or division, or does it go to the top purple exhibit in a class or division? And you have to keep in mind that depending on how that's written, there might be times that that is not going to be awarded at all. One other idea about this is to be sure you have a label on those special awards or some kind of a letter attached so your 4-Hers know who provided that award and where they can send a thank you note. In the judging process, at the end, often different champions are selected. The reserve champion ribbons are awarded to the second highest quality exhibit in a single division if there is a worthy exhibit. The champion ribbons are awarded to the highest quality exhibit in a single division if there's a worthy exhibit. So those talk about specific divisions of a project area. Then if we go on to Reserve Grand Champion, the Reserve Grand Champion ribbons are awarded to the second highest quality exhibit in one project area. And again, that's if the quality merits this award. And Grand Champion ribbons are awarded to the highest quality exhibit in one project area if its quality merits this award. While you may have a donor who provides a ribbon or a trophy, if the quality does not merit, the champions or reserve champions should not be, or grand champions or reserve grand champions should not be awarded.
Okay, so similar to the superintendents, I've kind of put together a timeline of what needs to happen and when. So starting in February, again, kind of a similar timeline with those, similar to the superintendent timeline. You just want to make a list of each project area and who you need. So again, determine how many judges you will need in each project area. Can they judge both 4-H and open class? Is your day structured in a way that that's possible, or do you need to get separate judges? In March is when I recommend sending that first ask letter, but this is going to include a stamped response card. So a postcard that's already been stamped by you that they can quickly, check yes, check no, and stick it back in the mail. Now, I know as well as you do, it sounds awfully simple. They don't always stick it in the mail. So, a lot of the judges' lists, which we will cover in a moment, do include numbers. So give them a week or two to return that response card. If you don't hear from them, follow up with a phone call. And then again, it's kind of that same cycle. You send letters, you try and get back as many postcards, you're calling, you're checking people off, highlighting the ones that are a yes, just kind of get into a rhythm of following up with all those folks until you've got your list complete. And again, work with your team in your office, divide up the project areas, who's going to take what. So again, it doesn't become overwhelming for any one person. 3 weeks prior to your fair, June or July, whenever that may be, send that confirmation letter And again, it's very helpful as a judge to receive the Fairbook, or at least the section of rules that pertain to the area that you're judging. A list of superintendents, so they know going in that they're going to have some help keep things organized. And that consultative judging handout, again, is crucial to them understanding their role in that educational experience. It covers the right kind of questions, how to give appropriate feedback. We just want this to be as much of a positive experience as possible, and that's a very helpful piece. Then, similar to the superintendents following your fair, it's a really nice gesture to send a thank you note. And sometimes I've been really on the ball and have kids, sign sheets of paper with pictures on it, and then I actually have something signed by the kids that I can stick in the mail to them, and that's a nice little perk when you're that organized. Doesn't always happen, but it's when it does, it's a win. So, where to find judges? Several of us maintain lists, and I'll put in a plug. This is the time of year to please send your lists to your area specialists so that they can keep those lists maintained and updated and as current as possible. We maintain a list in the Southwest that's on our Southwest Research Extension page. The Northeast has several lists, including some other area lists, so that's a good one to check out. And then I know that Daryl Waldron maintains the Certified Dog Judges list. So if he doesn't post that on the web because it changes so frequently, but if you ever need to get that list, just email him, and he's very happy to send that to you. On the day of judging, I think it's really helpful to kind of have a bulleted list of what you need to go over. And if you can provide some kind of a judge's orientation and even have your superintendents there as well so that you can go over all of this at once with everyone and they all hear the same thing, it really makes for a successful kind of smooth judging process. So things to cover. Obviously, you want to welcome them and thank them for their time. Introduce yourself and any other extension staff, support staff, office professionals, fair board members that might be in the buildings or the barns. It's nice that they see those faces and know who to go to for help if they have questions. Many of them, it might be their first time in your location, so make sure they know where the fair office is, the restrooms, kitchen, etc. Have plenty of Fairbooks on hand for both the judges and the superintendents so that they have copies in front of them that they can refer to. Go over and give a decent review of the 4-H ribbon system. Have the ribbons in your hand in front of them so that you can distinguish. I know some locations and fairs have different sets of ribbons for 4-H and open class, and when you can physically hold on to them and show them, that helps sort of clarify that. Again, make sure your judges understand if they're judging 4-H, if they're judging 4-H and open, or if they're judging strictly open, because they need to understand the difference of those ribbons and how to select them. Go over your top blue or your state fair blue, whatever you refer to it as, and any other ribbons and special award trophies that they might need to select. Oftentimes, I created a kind of a fill in the blank. If there's a certain project area, let's say foods always seems to have the best bread, or there's a couple special unique awards. Have kind of a blank fill-in sheet for that superintendent so they know exactly what that judge needs to select in order to give those awards out. And then give them a little talk, go over that consultative judging piece about appropriate constructive feedback, both verbally and written. And again, you kind of want them to walk that fine line. You don't want them to take too long, but you don't want them to rush through it's, again, kind of a fine balance. But that child has worked all year long and in many cases put a lot of time and effort into it, and you really do want them to get both good verbal feedback and written feedback, especially for the parents. Appreciate that written piece, both on what they did well and what they could improve on. If they do get, a red or a white or a blue, if there's room for improvement, they need to know what that is. I always, tell judges and superintendents to think, if you were that child's parent, what would help them learn more and be encouraged at the same time to continue in the project for next year. And that usually helps send that message home. We've also provided several resources as they pertain to judges. So we've got the initial ask letter and the enclosed postcard. It's 4 to a page. There's the sample confirmation letter and what needs to be included with that mailing. And then there's several different consultative judging pieces that will help them understand that process. I'm going to actually back out of the PowerPoint for a minute and take you to the resource page. Let me stop screen sharing momentarily. Okay, so we've created the link under what's hot. It's on the very top of the list. But I want to kind of take you the long route. It's not really that long, but I want you to know where you can find it. So when you hover over resources, select 4-H library. And it's right there about halfway down on the list. Select County Fair resources. At the top, you'll see the PowerPoint slides for today's presentation. You can print those off in PDF and refer back to them. This is also where the recorded webinar will be located for any office colleagues that can attend, or please share that with them. That's where those videos will be embedded. And if you scroll down, there's lots and lots of different resources. There's a section on policies, the project exhibit judging experience. There's the link to the scorecards. Here's our section for superintendents, where you'll see those checklists and sample letters. Same for the judges, the copies of the letters, the postcards, that consultative piece. And then here at the bottom, there's several different, what I referred to as signage. So here's that ribbon explanation. These are meant to be printed on 11 by 17. Many office copiers will do that. You can always size it down for 8.5 by 11 if you don't have that ability locally. There's the ribbon piece. There's that signage for parents that kind of encourages them to stay back, allowing their child to be responsible for their exhibit. And then there's just a sign with the 4-H pledge. A lot of fairgoers that don't necessarily have a 4-H background always want to know what the H's stand for. And then there's some stall cards, livestock ones, horse ones, and then ones for rabbit and poultry cages. Let me go back.
At this time, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to include those in the chat box. You can also unmute yourself if you would like to. You can do that in the lower left-hand corner of your Zoom screen, and you can ask your question as well that way. So again, if you have questions, you can insert those into the chat box, or you can unmute yourself and you can ask those. Thank you, Amy. We'll see you later. All right, we have a question from Ross. Who are superintendents accountable to? Particularly those who are not screen volunteers, Extension Board or Fair Board. Shouldn't Fair Boards be in charge or recruitment and selection of open class superintendents and judges?
This is Diane, and so when we think about going back to the policy and who covers what, I think that, to me, if your superintendent works with the 4-H division, then that could be more of what the extension handles, and then, to me, then if it's open class, then the Fair Board would be helpful with those superintendents and judges. Anybody else like to answer that, Beth or Amy or Sarah?
Yeah, I would just chime in. I think that's the ultimate sort of ideal situation. It's not always the case, especially when you have smaller fairs. A lot of times your superintendents will do both 4-H and open. So I think that's sort of where the point you want to get to, is that your Fair Board would be facilitating entirely the open class division, which would include, getting open class judges, open class superintendents, and just sort of taking care of that entire part of the fair. But in reality, we know that isn't the case all the time. But I think if we continue to try and move towards that, that would be the ultimate ideal.
I have another question. What do you do if you have a Fair Board that has traditionally made rules and governed 4-H fair rules? To understand that it's the Extension Office that truly governs all 4-H during the fair.
Since this is, again, policy related, I'll take a stab at this one. So, Nicole, what I think would need to happen is to start that discussion with them. And, sometimes they like to see it in writing. So you'd show them the policy book. You may want to get your director involved as well, and just have that conversation of, this is our role. This is, as a Fair Board, your role. I know it's easier said than done.
I would just encourage you to have that conversation as early as possible in the year, so that they have time to digest that and be okay with that, and maybe baby steps to get to the point where you want them to get.
I think here in Wilson County at our fair, we've discovered that since we govern 4-H, it's just as easy to do the open class. We're small, so it's easy for us to do that. And that's the best way we've found to keep the Fair Board out of it, from being involved with the 4-H stuff, is we just take care of all the exhibits part of the stuff. They take care of the big stuff, money makers like the rodeo and stuff. And that, to us, that's been the easiest way to deal with a difficult Fair Board sometimes.
Thank you. We have another question. Is there a memorandum of understanding in regard to the division of authority with the State Fair Board Association?
Not that I'm aware of. We'll have to look into that, because I don't know that. Beth, do you or Amy?
I am not aware of a specific memorandum of understanding with the State Fair Board.
All right. Cheryl, if we do find out something different, we will let you know. There was an old task force report, and the policy guide all comes from Extension. Has there been any thought or discussion in partnering with the Fairs and Festivals group so that there's buy-in from the fair side of things?
There is an updated version of that, the guide that you're talking about. It's on the website, and Amy put a link there that was updated in 2013. I know that Wade was at the Fairs and Festivals Association and had a lot of questions about roles and responsibilities. So I do believe that the administrative team is kind of looking at what we do have there. So we'll be sure and pass that on, John.
Thank you, John. Are there any other questions? Again, you can put those in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself and ask.
So yes, at the end of this, we'll capture those questions, and then if we need follow-up, we'll be sure and get back.
All right. I don't see any other questions. I want to thank you all again for attending today's webinar. The next webinar, I believe, is February 22nd, and there will be additional information on our website and the tip sheet and the Tuesday letters, so please keep your eyes out for that information. We'd like to thank you all today for being on the call. Today's call or webinar was recorded, and it will be posted online. I will be staying on for just a while longer so that if you have any questions, we can get those answered. But again, thank you for joining us today.